Chapter 1, Mentality and Perspective. Now, your mentality as a jungler is going to dictate how you see the game, okay? So this is my goal in this chapter, is to change how you look at the game. League of Legends is not a 5v5. No matter how many people tell you it is, no matter how many pro teams seem to be 5v5ing, they're 5v5ing for like 2 minutes out of 30 minutes of a game, right? If that. In solo queue, it's even less. So 5v5 is really a big myth. Yes, there are 5 champions against 5 champions, but what you're really in is a 1v1. If I use an analogy, those of you who watch soccer or football, or if you watch any sport really, what you are in that team sport is a matchup. You are probably against someone who is like you. For example, if you're a defender in a sport, you are going to be guarding or marking an attacker. So if I'm playing against Lionel Messi in soccer, I'm not thinking about his other 10 teammates, I'm thinking about stopping Lionel Messi. It's exactly the same on Summoner's Rift. You are trying to stop the Lionel Messi of the enemy team being the jungler. Now, I'm not saying they actually are Lionel Messi or like the best player on that team, but that's your mindset. I am in a matchup with this guy. If I can actually create a gap in this 1v1, it means that I have the most influence possible on the 5v5. You have Smite, they have Smite. You both play the same role. Who's going to play that role the best? That's the most important part of this guide, to be honest. If you can understand that, guys, we are going to go places. Our decisions are based on 2 things, okay? And I mentioned this in the laning course. The only 2 things you care about on League of Legends: gold and experience. You don't care about anything else. You are making a decision based on gold and experience. You are not protecting a lane because you are protecting a lane. You are protecting a lane from getting dove because you know that if they do get dove, you get golden experience from killing the enemy champions. You are not looking to gank a lane because, oh, I think I can like stop them from pressuring my laner here. You are ganking a lane because you think you can kill that lane. That is your mindset. You look at the map and you see dollar bills. You do not see, oh, less pressure. Oh, let me try and help this teammate who's already lost lane and they're going to die anyway. That is a terrible way to look at the game, and it's just suboptimal. You want to be playing the game based on your own golden experience. And the reason this might be a little bit difficult to transition into is because very few people see the game like this. So if you're not helping out your mid laner who's shoved under his tower on 1 HP because you know it's just impossible to gank them and kill them, he might even be able to 1v2, you're going to get pinged for it maybe. But at the end of the day, golden experience is all that matters, and trust me, after going through this course and applying the stuff, you're not going to see those players anymore. Now, just a couple more points. The only premeditated idea you have, and this is super important, is where you start. Not, I'm full clearing to this side of the map every game. Oh my god, it's bot meta, I have to path bot. This is just total nonsense. I've had so many students tell me this, like, oh yeah, I had this coach who told me this, or someone on YouTube, like a video, told me that it's bot meta, so I have to path bot. Absolute rubbish. What you are thinking about before you get into a game is the jungle matchup, and we'll get into this very soon, but you're also thinking about where you start based on that information. For example, if I'm playing Graves and I'm against a Kindred, I'm not going to start at my blue buff unless I have like Aurelia mid who's going to guarantee me prio, and a really strong bot lane who again is going to guarantee me prio, like maybe Lux Caitlyn. I'm not going to risk the chance of me getting invaded by a Kindred with 2 strong lanes around my red buff, so I'm not even thinking about if it's bot meta or I have to full clear every game because the jungle somewhat changes because of some random patch. Guys, just throw that thinking out of the window. The only plan you have is what buff you start at. You have no idea what's going to happen in a game. This is why when Bo, and I'll show you this clip right now, I think this is his first pro game for Team Vitality in the LEC, and this guy is a freak jungler. He used to play for FPX and like carried them back in 2019 or 2020, and the first game he's in, he does his red buff and he level 2 ganks bot lane. I remember watching Yamato Cannon's reaction to this, and he said he thinks it's solo queue, which is just wrong. The reason he does this is because it's jungling. He does red buff, and he's asking himself, as I'm doing red buff, the bot lane is already fighting a level 1, and the enemy champions have priority. They're not going to hit level 2 for another 30 seconds, so I can gank this lane as level 2 Graves with 2 cooldowns, and kill these 2 level 1 champions, and GG, I've won the game, because I'm thinking about the game like this, not because I'm thinking, because I started red buff, I have to go red Krugs, Raptors, and full clear to my top side. Wrong. You are reacting to the information based on the map. Bo sees golden experience in this lane, that's why he goes there. And even if the enemy jungler decided to invade his top side of the map, if he thinks there's some sort of counterplay there, he should be able to deal with it from that point onwards, and it's still worth to get this kill. So what I'm saying here, guys, if you have a static mindset in a changing environment, you are going to be left behind. Can you guys remember the Brad Pitt quote from Moneyball? Don't know if you guys have seen that movie. I just thought of this, but yeah, Brad Pitt in that says adapt or die. To one of like the old scouts who can't actually change. He doesn't really accept like the new people coming in. That's exactly what we're talking about here. So to all you Hecarim mains who are full clearing every game, bro, you are static in a changing environment. You're going to get left behind, and I guarantee you, you will not hit Challenger. So that's the first chapter on jungling, guys, mentality and perspective. Hopefully, I have shifted this mindset a little bit for you, and now it's time to really get into the jungling theory. So chapter 2, jungling theory. Camps are your minions. We generally want to be pathing based on the jungle camps so we have a steady income of golden experience. Otherwise, you will have the least amount of gold out of all 10 players guaranteed. But when there is a free kill, this pathing can deviate, of course, because you're getting more golden experience from a kill or two most of the time, right, than just farming camps. And guess what? You always have your camps to fall back on, which again is exactly why Bo is deciding to gank this bot lane at level 2. He thinks there's a great chance of killing them, and he can always come back to Krugs. He can always come back to Raptors. In terms of pathing and sequencing, guys, there are a couple of like little mini chapters here I want to get into. Pathing and sequencing. When you're pathing, this is just the order in which you're doing your camps. So if you start at red buff, you can go Krugs Raptors to hit level 3. Krugs and Raptors will be sequenced together. You might even decide to start at Raptors and then go Krugs into red. So again, you sequence Raptors and Krugs together and do your red buff afterwards, so therefore you're a bit more flexible. If you decide to finish your pathing on Krugs, you're kind of like pushing yourself and limiting yourself to only one side of the map, this being like the top lane or bot lane, depending on the side of the map you're actually on. So pathing is very important. Also, if you're running out of base, right, let's just say you're red side and you're running bot side of the map. Doing Gromp and Wolves is telling me that you want to path top side, or maybe you can gank mid after Wolves for sure, but if you want to go bot side, you would actually do Wolves and Gromp into like a dragon, or maybe invade the enemy red buff, right? So there has to be a deliberate sense of pathing and sequencing when you are clearing your camps. You're not just autopiloting, oh, my Wolves are closest to me, let's just do Wolves first, and all of a sudden you waste time, because if you're going to go to your Raptors after you go Wolves Gromp, you've got to double back and cover that same distance again. Whereas you could have just gone to Gromp, Wolves and Raptors and saved 10 seconds. Do this 10 times in a game, that's 100 seconds you're wasting. This is why it's so important. So there has to be a deliberate pathing and sequencing based on what you want to do in the near future. Of course, stuff happens on the map, you have to react to it, so sometimes your pathing and sequencing will be stuffed up, but just make sure you're stuffing it up or stopping, yourself from doing a camp because you've got such a good chance of getting golden experience from a kill instead. Now the next jungling theory I want to get into here is 12 camps. 12 camps, what on earth does this mean? You have 6 camps, the enemy jungler has 6 camps. The best way to think about the jungler is this, guys. You want a baseline of golden experience. Like I said before, camps are your minions. You want that to be your baseline. Your own camps, they're always going to be there. That's like your foundational golden experience. Like you can just full clear every game, right? And you're going to get a steady income of golden experience from your camps. But it's much better to farm, if it's plausible, the enemy camps before yours. I kind of mentioned this before, right? You are going to have your camps pretty much most of the time to fall back on, especially the lower you go in terms of elo. They won't counter jungle and this type of stuff, right? So if you can actually make the enemy jungler's camps most of your gold and experience, you are, in essence, denying them their own golden experience. Now, of course, there might be some stuff where both of you do each other's camps, for sure. But if that was the case, then everyone would be challenger. Lots of junglers and lower elos just don't recognize this, and you can catch them out a lot of the time, which is what I would teach you. So thinking about the map in terms of 12 camps, you want to be as greedy as possible for the enemy's camps because they will waste time checking those camps that you've just done. And they will waste time and you will buy yourself time. It's very double-edged. For example, if I ask you, like, how many of you have actually gone past the middle of the map, not many of you have done. I remember coaching someone to rank 1 EUS, and my first session actually watching him, he didn't even invade the enemy Nunu, and he was like 2-0 on Nidalee at level 3. Did not run past the middle of the map once, because he didn't think about the jungle like this, and when he did, he got to rank 1. So this is a super important concept. The next concept I kind of want to get into here is the Rift Herald versus Dragons question. The first Rift Herald, guys, at the moment, and of course, like, the meta can change based on the patch notes, right? But if Rift Herald stays like it is by far the most important objective on the map. So, around 8 minutes, Rift Herald, because it gives you so much gold, and potentially, like, first tower, it's the biggest snowball there is. If you are ahead of the enemy jungler, if you are giving up Rift Herald, bro, you are trolling. Or they're just leveraging their stronger lanes to win the jungle, because they can't beat you in a 1v1, but you do not want to be giving up Rift Herald for free. And guess what? Just like I said, in Challenger Elo, you probably have to give up Rift if you're not as strong. But in other Elos, you can sneak this. You can do it on spawn. And if you have a lead, I can teach you just how to use this thing to snowball out of control and 1v9 your games, even if your teammates are behind. Now, other generalities we might hear. I mentioned before, right, we've got bot meta, always full clear. Guys, like I said, the only premeditated jungling theory you have is the camp you start at. That's it. Everything else is based on golden experience. Lots of people try to complicate this game and make it sound a lot harder than it is. It's really not that difficult. You are just thinking about the game in terms of golden experience. We simplify things. That's why challenger players are challenger players. There's no fluff. There's no nonsense. That's all we look at. Like in every session I think I do with someone who isn't maybe in like those higher echelons of elo, is I will say like, why did you gank this lane? There's no kill here. And they end up not getting a kill when they could have just like base, cleared their red buff for level 6, gone into Rift Herald or something, because maybe they've been told or even coached or taught to relieve pressure on a lane when it's pushed up like this. Like help your teammates out. But if I'm playing a lane and my jungler doesn't get a kill or anything, like I'm unhappy. I want you to gank my lane because I want you to kill them. That actually means after that I can get a lead myself. I can kill the minions, I can get tower plays, I can deny stuff from them. That's what the game is about, guys. So that's the jungling theory chapter. Now next chapter, chapter 3, your 4 best friends. The map, and this includes champion icons. So the champion icons, they can either be above your map or on the left of your screen. I'd highly recommend putting them above your map. Why are these champion icons so important? That's because they tell you what is happening in that lane. You probably don't even have to look at the lane that much, because you should probably be able to tell what's happening based on your own champions and teammates' HP. For example, like if your teammates are all full HP while you're clearing your first buff, nothing's happening. Like they're not fighting or anything, right? It's like a Mexican standoff. They're just chilling. But if they are low HP, it's probably because they've been fighting with the enemy champions. HP, guys, is the most important factor when you are ganking a lane, and we'll get into that later. So you want to be interested in those lanes that are lower HP. And that's a great way to do it, just to look at the champion icons above the minimap. And yes, as for your map being one of your best friends, the map is everything, guys, when it comes to jungling. This is what you listen to. You don't listen to your mid laner pinging for assistance, you listen to the map. You have to be good enough as a jungler to be able to judge for yourself if you can gank a lane or not. In other words, if you can kill a lane or not. I'm only interested in getting 300 golden experience if I go to that lane. Can I do it? Maybe not, because the enemy jungler's here. The map is in fog. I can't do it, like they haven't shown on the map yet. The enemy supporter's on a roam timer because they're running out of base. Like there's too many enemy champions in fog. I just want to wait until the map tells me I can do it. I want to do Rift Herald here because the map is telling me the enemy jungler is bot side. Or I want to do maybe Dragon here, the second dragon, because I just got Rift Herald and I know the enemy jungler is probably pathing to their blue buff because the map is telling me it's got that gold icon. It's on a 10-second respawn timer. This is crucial. You have to be looking at your map all the time. One great exercise you guys can do is after each auto attack, because you can train your eyes, they are a muscle to do this. When you're auto attacking camps, after each auto attack, look at the minimap. Auto attack, map. Auto attack, map. Auto attack, map. You are going to miss information. That's what jungling is, guys. It's about collecting all the info possible in that situation and making the best decision in terms of punishing your opponents, minimizing their gold, and maximizing yours, creating a gap. Your next best friend is the scoreboard. Why is the scoreboard useful? Let's have a think. Well, the scoreboard tells us what? So it tells us items, it tells us levels, and it tells us CS. CS is the most important thing in terms of the jungle, because CS represents levels. It also represents what camps they've done and what camps they're likely going to do. If you see a champion with 8 CS, a jungler, they are 1 camp away from level 3 most likely, so they are still level 2. If you're level 3 in that situation, you might just think of running for them. If they've still got to farm 1 more camp, you can think about what that camp is and sprint at them, if you think you win the 1v1, of course. Another example is me asking you guys about 24 CS. What does this mean for most junglers? This means a full clear. That's 6 camps. What about 20 CS? 5 camps. 16 CS? 4 camps. 28 CS? Full clear plus Scuttle Crab. And you can already see how useful this is. Just remember that Rift Herald, Dragons, everything on the map is worth 4 CS if you clear the whole camp. So scoreboarding is really important as well, guys, and as soon as the enemy jungler shows, this should be one of your processes, pressing tab and looking at the CS, trying to figure out where they've been and where they're going to go. Now, next best friend, F keys. Using your F keys, guys, to look at your champions and therefore the lane is essential. Just like I mentioned before, when your teammates are low HP, the enemy champions are likely to be low HP as well. Use your F keys to look at those lanes. What you do not want to do is move your mouse from like the middle of your screen when you're clearing a camp all the way down to the bottom right to look at the lane and then all the way back to yourself, right? That is just so inefficient. We want to be as fast as possible because information can change so quickly. It doesn't take that long for someone to quickly run it down and they go from unkillable to killable. F keys we should be using when we see champion icons on the minimap really close to each other, especially when they're on top of each other, because that means they're probably fighting, using resources, losing HP, and therefore they become more killable during that period of time. we need to figure out, can I actually really kill them here because of that info? So F keys. The last one is the game timer here. So as a jungler, the game time, and I've been coaching a lot of people recently, this is honestly like the most underrated resource you have, is actually the fact you have a clock in the top right that tells you what time it is in the game. Because as the game progresses, it's really about the map, right? Like that's what Summoner's Rift is. It is about actually being able to play the map as well as you can, because that is the geography you're playing on. So if we can exploit the map better than someone else, we're going to be a lot better off. So the clock in the top right, time represents certain things. 3:30, what does that represent as a jungler? Scuttle Crab. What about 4:20? That's the respawn of your first camp, or the camp you did after your first buff. If you go red Krugs Raptors, Krugs are going to respawn around 4:20. That's a level 4 camp. That's important. 5 minutes is Dragon. It's also the second side of the map if a jungler full cleared. So if you go red Krugs Raptors to Wolves, Grand Blue, Wolves are going to respawn your top side around 5 minutes. This is absolutely essential. Around 6 minutes, your first buff is going to respawn in about 45 seconds, like the enemy jungler. Maybe you're a lot stronger and you can hit them on their first buff again. 8 minutes, Rift Herald. And there are plenty more timers throughout a game, right? 14 minutes for turret plates, it might be 20 minutes for Baron. Again, understanding what that value in the top right represents when it comes to the map and what's spawning, especially when you're ahead, because you will just keep finding hits on the enemy jungler. They're going to go here, based on the map and the game time, so I'm going to run there and kill them because I'm stronger. Oh, now they're going to go here, so I'm going to run there and kill them again. Oh, he's probably bot side here because of the game timer at 6:40, like his red buff, he started there, so I'm going to dive his bot lane because he's not going to be this side of the map. This is so crucial, and you can probably also tell like how some of these best friends work together here. Chapter 4, Jungling Types. Guys, there are 3 types of champions when it comes to jungling. First one, level 1 invaders. Second one, level 2 gankers or invaders. 3, level 3 champions. Level 1 invaders. These are strong level 1 champions. You don't really need to worry about champions with maybe Aftershock or Grasp of the Undying, even though no jungler is going to take that rune. But yeah, hopefully this makes sense, right? Like if you're playing against a jungler at level 1 with a stacking keystone like Conqueror, Lethal Tempo, especially when they have other champions of the same ilk, like top laners with these stacking runes or AD carries, which will happen for the most part, you do have to be a little bit wary of them. So what you're trying to do here is categorize these junglers, and you can even make like a little document for yourself where you actually like kind of write down what category those junglers fit into. Some of them might go into multiple ones, but what you're trying to figure out is maybe when they have the biggest advantage over you or disadvantage, like you might have a big advantage over them. So level 1 invaders, these include champions like Kindred, like Graves, Diddley. So there are certain champions, would I care if I get invaded at level 1? Next one, level 2 gankers or invaders. These are champions that when they have red buff at level 2, they can gank a lane or invade you. So again, champions like Graves, Kindred, J4, Lee Sin can do it, Diddley can do it, Vi can do it, even Elise can level 2 gank and maybe even invade if you're a very weak jungler early game. So lots of champions can do this. In these type of situations, you really need to be aware if that champion first of all starts at their red buff, and if you think you have a lane that's killable for them after they do their red buff. So can they gank mid lane? Can they gank my bot lane straight away? What about my top lane? Like it might be a matchup where there's Renekton with 2 combat summoner spells against a Riven with 2 combat summoner spells. A red buff J4 who has Renekton on his team might be very interested in ganking that lane straight away. And of course you have to be wary if these champions do invade you. For example, they can just go from their red buff into your Gromp if you started at blue. They can even just go to your blue buff straight away if it's up. So one important thing, if you are weaker at level 2 in terms of having red buff against these champions, warding your second buff is vital. So it should be your blue buff, right? Because you should be starting red against these early game aggressors. This means that if they do invade that blue buff, you know, and you can either react to it in one of 2 ways. You can actually clear your whole red side, so red, Krugs, Raptors, and hit level 3 and just react. If you think you can actually pinch them with your teammates, do so. If not, you can do exactly what I coach the students do in this game, and you can run to the enemy jungler's blue buff side yourself and vertical jungle. This is where we get that term from, because you're staying on one side of the map, you're just going up and down like the enemy jungler. But I'll let this video play out because I think this is a really nice point to make. As you can see, we're about golden experience, remember. As the student is clicking on his way to the enemy jungler's blue buff, we see that bot lane starts fighting. And because they are 2 immobile champions and they look as if they're going to fight for a long period of time, there's intention here, there's body language, we actually just go bot and pick up 2 free kills. So if I did actually invade the bot side here, those 2 free kills give me more golden experience. Even if they were a kill and assist or maybe 2 assists, it's probably still worth it. Now level 3 champions. This is every jungler in the game, guys. Like when you're level 3 and you have 3 abilities, this can be like Hecarim with his QWE, Evelyn exactly the same thing, right? You have your 3 basic abilities, you can make plays happen. Like yes, if you're playing Evelyn or Hecarim, something like this, right? For sure, most of the time you might want to hit level 4, which is fine by the way, if there's nothing going on the map, and there's no chance of the enemy jungler hitting you on something. If you're not going to lose anything for full clearing, by all means do it, but most of the time you will be missing opportunities. But yeah, back to this level 3 champions type thing. Sejuani, Zac, Rammus, these tanky champions who provide a lot of utility, their utility comes from having 3 abilities for the most part. So these champions, that's really what they want to do. Hit level 3 and then they know they're sweet. Your goal, if you're a very aggressive and stronger early game jungler, is to make it as difficult as possible for them. If I'm playing something like a Sejuani, Zac, maybe something like a Hecarim, Evelyn, I don't want the enemy jungler running at me, leave me alone bro. Let me full clear like everyone else and I'll be happy. But that's not Challenger. That is not good jungling if you're letting them off the hook. So those are the jungling types. Try to create some sort of document where you're categorizing these junglers into one of these categories, if not more. Chapter 5, Jungle Timings. Now this chapter here has probably gained more elo for people in recent times than I think anything else I'm going to teach you in this course, so if you're going to pay attention to anything, like this is it. 125, late invade. 130, and this is the most important time in any game. First camp. Are they starting on a buff? Do you think they're starting on Raptors or Wolves and solo leashing themselves? Where do you think the enemy jungler has started? And we'll get into more of these examples in the future. 145, level 2 gank or an invade. 230, level 3 crossover. Level 3 means, yeah, you're just hitting level 3 off your third camp. The crossover means you're probably transitioning from one side of the map to the other. If you go red, Krugs, Raptors, if you're not staying on that side, you're moving over to your Wolves, naturally. And lots of full clearers and junglers will do this. 3 minute. Base for crab contest. What does this mean? This means that if you have a kill in the early game, what you can do if it is around 3 minutes, especially before 3 minutes, is you can insta recall and buy your items, because if we think about the champions on the map in terms of gold, you will have the most if you get a first blood or an early kill. You will be plus 400 on everybody else. Don't you want to use that gold and that advantage for as long as possible? So you can just recall, buy 2 longswords, buy an Amtone Dark Seal, buy a blasting wand if you have it, and then run at the scuttle crab you think the enemy jungler is going to be at. That is in essence the start of a snowball. 330, scuttle crab. 345 to 4 minutes, base for the first camp respawn at 420. Camps guys have 2 minute 15 timers. Buffs have 5 minutes. So if you start a clear and you go red Krugs Raptors, Krugs, they are going to respawn around 420. You will finish your red buff at 140. That will respawn at around 640. You finish your Krugs at around 2 minutes, 2 minute 15 timer. 4 minutes 20 around about that. Easy to remember because it's 420. So think about basing a good 20 or 30 seconds before this so you can actually get to your first camp again. 5 minutes is Dragon, second quadrant. Dragon obviously spawns at 5 minutes, so we have to think about that. If you're versing like an Udyr or a Shyvana, they might even think about sneaking this right. But the second quadrant is also important to think about. Your camps, if I use the same example, red Krugs Raptors, and then you go to your Wolves, red and Krugs, the actual respawn timers will be 420 for Krugs, and Raptors will be about 20 seconds after that, 440. Then you're going straight to Wolves. That will be around 5 minutes. It's exactly the same if you go from bot side of the map or your blue buff to the red buff side of the map as well. That 5 minute timer means the second set of camps are going to be respawning. So again, if the enemy jungler is doing something else on the map and you know they are, you can hit that second quadrant and steal their camps. 6 minutes. Base for first buff respawn at 640. So this just means because your red buff or your blue buff is going to respawn around 640, you can base just before this and get there and use it for as long as possible. Ideally, you don't really want to take your red buff or blue buff and then just recall straight away because you're kind of wasting it. So you're only doing that, by the way, if you need the gold for a legit big item. Around 7 minutes, base for Rift Herald hit. This just means that ideally before Rift Herald, around 7 minutes, you can actually just recall and then run straight to Rift Herald. You can even do this before, by the way. So even around like 6:30, you could recall and just run to your red buff area, clear these camps or red buff, depending on like how close you are to level 6, and then just run to Rift Herald and start it straight away if the enemy jungler is bot side. I will show you examples on all of these timings in the near future. So chapter 6, champ select loading screen. So in champ select or loading screen, you are asking yourself a few questions. Now, who are we asking ourselves about? Who's the most important champion in a game? Tell me quickly, based on chapter 1. The enemy jungler. All you're thinking about when you're in champ select or loading screen is, can you get invaded or late invaded by the enemy jungler and their team? So for example, if you're against something like a Kindred would press the attack, their bot lane might be something like, I don't know, Nautilus and Draven, and their mid lane, it could even be a good level 1 champion, maybe something like a Yasuo with lethal tempo. Once he gets this stacking in a 4v4 environment, he can really pop off. So you're just thinking about, can you get invaded by these strong champions at level 1, or late invaded even? Exactly the same thing. So a late invade just involves the jungler, and then a bunch of champions. It could be their bot lane, and their mid laner. It could just be the top laner invading that buff where they are close to. So at around 125, invading your red buff lane, or invading your blue buff lane, whatever the case may be. You can do this yourselves, of course. If you see that you have a Darius with Conqueror top against an Ornn with Grass the Undying, and you're playing Kindred to press the attack, you can think about late invading the enemy topside's buff. So that's your first question. Thinking about level 1 invades from both sides. Now, if you're not scared of it, and you don't really want to do it yourself, then you're thinking about what buff you start at. That is it. Now, once you've sorted that out, the next question you ask yourself is, are you stronger than the enemy jungler, or weaker, or the same? If you're the stronger jungler, you're going to start at red buff every single time. If you are the stronger jungler, guys, with red buff, you have so many possibilities to hit the weaker jungler. You could go red into their Gromp if they start at blue. You could go red into their red if they start at blue, and you can take their Krugs afterwards and be level 3. You also take both red buffs off the map, so the enemy jungler is playing without a red buff for the first 7 minutes. You could go red Krugs Raptors and then hit the enemy jungler at their second buff, or make any sort of play you want to, depending on if there are free kills or not. If you're the weaker jungler starting at red buff or Raptors, is very important here. The reason being is because you do not want to give the stronger jungler a hit on your red buff. You don't want that Kindred running at your red buff if you are a blue buff jungler. I don't care who you're playing. You don't want a Nidalee running at your red buff to invade you and put pressure on you, especially if they have stronger lanes. It's the worst feeling in the game as a jungler. Start your red buff unless you're scared of getting late invaded. Then you can always start at your Raptors. That means you can always just come back to red buff, clear your Krugs, and you hit level 3 free of charge. That is your goal in the early game as a weaker jungler, but starting blue buff is really a cardinal sin. Now, if you are even, what you can think about doing is starting at blue, but I think you should only really start at blue buff if you have the stronger early game lanes, or in other words, champions who might want to fight at level 2 or level 3, or champions who are going to have insane priority. So if you have a mid laner like Zoe against a Yone, that's an amazing lane to have in the mid lane because it means you're going to have priority. So Zoe is going to get the first move if there is some sort of jungle fight. So you can probably just start a blue buff knowing she'll come over to help you. Same thing goes for top lane, right? Like you might have a Darius early game with 2 combat summoner spells. Bot lane you might have something like a Karma, Caitlyn, or a Heimerdinger Varus, something like this. This is going to give them priority for the most part. That means you can probably start a blue buff again because they can help you when eventually you come down for that red buff, or vice versa. So that's really important if you're going to start at blue buff, guys. But if you start at blue buff as the stronger or weaker jungler, you are just missing opportunities and you are going to get hit and punished for it. Chapter 7, in-game. So what I'm going to teach you in this chapter, guys, I'm actually going to go through just a bunch of situations from students' games in recent history, and we're just going to go through all the possible situations that I come up with and probably all the tips I give out to students. So the first thing I want you doing in your games, like we talked about in champ selection loading screen, is thinking about getting late invaded. Can you invade? Can you late invade? Are you stronger than the enemy jungler, weaker, or the same? But the first action most of the time you're going to be doing if nothing happens before your first buff is actually pinging where the enemy jungler starts. Trust me, this is the only thing. If you're going to take one thing away from this course, this is what you do in your games. You are going to ping where the enemy jungler starts. How do we tell? All you have to do is look at your minimap. If you don't have a ward place at level 1, fine, no worries. Look at your minimap. If the enemy top laner shows first, they've probably started bot side. If the enemy bot lane shows first, they've probably started top side. If you're not sure, you can check the matter of the bot laners and top laners to really get a good understanding. If you can't actually really tell, most of the time the enemy jungler will start on their red buff or Raptors. And just a quick little tip here, by the way, starting at red buff is really nice because it will lead you into Rift Herald. So if you do your second red buff around 6:40 to 7 minutes, doing it there can lead you into Rift quite nicely. Anyway, so ping the enemy jungler where they start. That is absolutely essential. If I was to look at one of your games, you better be doing this at level 1. While you're clearing this red buff, if you are a level 2 jungler, you can even think of ganking or invading right away if the enemy jungler starts at blue buff. So as soon as you know this information, if the enemy jungler starts at red buff, based on the type of jungler they are, like if they're a level 2 invader, maybe like a Graves or a Kindred, you should have warded your blue buff, right, in case they actually invade you there. But if they're a champion, maybe like a Rek'Sai or a Xin Zhao, can't really do anything until level 3, you probably know from this point they're going to go red Krugs Raptors or red blue Gromp into making a play. Therefore, you can think of going red Krugs Raptors yourself and then making some sort of play on the map, or you can even think of invading them at level 3 if your laners have priority and you think you win some sort of fight. If you invade their blue buff, you can think to keep clearing. But if they start a blue buff, this is where it gets really interesting. Even if they're a level 3 champion, guys, and you are too, you can think about invading them at level 3 simply because you have red buff advantage. So if any champion starts a blue buff, you can honestly think of level 3 hitting them. You can even hit them at level 2 if you're, again, playing Kindred, if you're playing Graves, Nidalee on their Gromp. Just make sure if you do this invade, you do not smite red buff. Get a nice big leash from your bot lane and just run at their blue buff. I wouldn't really recommend doing it on the top side of the map because most of the time you're not going to get a big enough leash from your top laner and you will be late to the Gromp. So do this if you're bot side of the map. Another possibility you have if you know the enemy jungler starts at their blue buff is to go from your red to their red to their Krugs. This will mean you hit level 3 after their Krugs and you deny their red buff. Like I was saying before in one of the chapters, this means you get 2 red buffs out of 2 in the early game. The enemy jungler doesn't get their red buff until 7 minutes when it respawns. So that's what I'd be thinking when I'm starting a red buff here. So what I'm going to show you here, guys, is one of the most informative games. I actually had to make a YouTube video on it, but I'm just going to put it in this course because it's super helpful, right? And just like explains this early game kind of jungling theory we're getting into. The student Devious is going to start at his red buff here. Then he's going to go Krugs into Raptors. Because he's playing Echo, because you're a level 3 champion, you're not really going to make a play at level 2 really ever, right? So hitting level 3 first is what you want to do. And by the way, guys, in terms of clearing your camps, going red Krugs Raptors is so much better nowadays than going red Raptors Gromp, or red Wolves Gromp, or red Blue Gromp, simply because Krugs are so easy to take, and because they give the most experience out of any camp in the game, even more than buffs. You want to keep recycling these as much as possible, and again, because they're next to red buff, you sequence the Krugs with Raptors. Now, we know in this game that Diana started topside because the enemy bot lane showed earlier than the Camille top lane. So we know that Diana started topside here, and you can see that Devious is pinging the actual Wolf camp. Because junglers are going to be correlated in the early game. You doing your first camp, the enemy jungler is doing their first camp. Second camp, third camp, third camp. It's just after level 3, after the third camp, are they going to gank a lane? Are they going to invade me here? That's what you should be thinking. Now in this game, because Diana starts at blue, the first thought if you're Echo is, can I actually invade her at a red buff? And in this game, even though Devious is playing Echo, who is not the strongest early game jungler in the world, this is exactly what it does. It doesn't really matter about his lanes either, because you're going to be 1v1ing this champion for about 10 seconds. This gives you enough time to get their flash and get a serious advantage over them. There is nothing more annoying if you're a laner and you see your jungler like needing help and requesting help, and you're like, bro, I have a wave under my tower. I don't want to come over and help you because you're probably losing anyway. Like, what am I going to do to salvage this situation? So Echo ends up getting first blood. So this is just early game jungling. It's not aggression, it's not about being passive, it's about picking the right play based on the info we have. If Diana starts a red buff, is Echo going to go from his red buff side into Diana's blue buff side? He definitely could, because he has a strong top laner. Always think about this, guys. If you have a strong top laner, like a Darius, a Riven with 2 combat summoner spells, maybe a Set, a Renekton, you can actually do this vertical jungling, because the issue there is, like, if Diana thinks you're doing that, she just goes to your bot side and she's playing towards the bot lane. But in this game, Soraka, Jinx, Lucia, Nami, it's kind of chill for the most part. I would much rather have my Darius going. So doing that invade for your Echo, red Krugs Raptors into Diana's top side is a good option as well if Diana starts a red. But she's just asleep at the wheel here, and she was also apparently a Smurf, so in this game I taught a gold jungler just how to crush a Smurf in the first 3 minutes. Now at this point in the game, this is what we're going to do. We're actually going to go through this game, guys, and I give you all the situations you need, and this is actually going to be like the real contents of this course. And in the future I will definitely do more of these. Now in this situation, what would you guys do? So we've already talked about, because we already have like this foundation of theory, I guess, from the other chapters, what do you think is like really important for the Echo to do here? Because we talked about this in one of the chapters, so jungle timings. So look at the time for me, and on your screen, like in your game, it will be in the top right, but because it's a replay, it's in the top middle. It's 3:08. This is around 3 minutes. Now, yes, it's not 3 minutes, and it's not before 3 minutes, but 8 seconds later is still good enough to press the B button. Echo just got first blood. He is plus 400 gold on Diana. He also has red buff. Diana does not. So in terms of fighting this enemy jungler, you are trying to always ask yourself, guys, do I beat them in a 1v1? If you do, you are thinking about hitting them on camps. And the reason I call these hits is because they are hits on timers. You have to understand how long it takes to actually run to a camp, how long it takes to recall and run somewhere on the map. You are trying to track the enemy jungler as best as possible, as if you didn't actually have fog on your screen. So what I'm talking about here is that I think because Scuttle Crab is going to be something that Diana wants, she's probably going to run straight to one of them. Now Echo, even though he might be a little bit later here, because generally speaking, guys, it takes around 40 seconds to recall and then run to the middle of the map. Around 40 seconds. So it might be 3:48 at that time. The great thing though about that, if you're Echo, is that after that time, if you find Diana anywhere, you can fight her on one of those future camps, you can gank a lane straight away, you just use your gold straight away, right? And this will be even more effective if you get an even earlier first blood or early kill. But this happens throughout a game. This is not just early game, guys. So like I mentioned in the jungle timings chapter, what about their red buff when it respawns or their blue buff? Can I hit them there? What about if I hit level 6 and they're still level 5 farming their bot side? That's where I think they're going to be. You can time your hits based on if you win a 1v1 or not. If you're the other champion though and you're scared of getting hit, you are trying to avoid this or prevent it as much as possible. Just like if you're playing a Sejuani level 1 against a Kindred, you don't want your blue buff to be taken, so you're going to ward that around 115. You are trying to prevent and avoid a hit from the stronger enemy jungler. Now the unfortunate thing in this game is that Devious decides to stay on the map here. He decides to do Scuttle Crab, and after Scuttle Crab basing is still fine, which is what I thought he was going to do. But unfortunately he stops his base and ends up running to the mid lane, which really doesn't do anything. So I thought here as he starts his recall, oh my goodness, we have made it as a jungler, we're going to transcend, but unfortunately he ends up running mid. The important thing about this timing, if you look as well guys, you might be like, why would I not just clear my board side here? Blue, Gromp, Wolves. We are thinking about the jungle in terms of golden experience. We do not want to give up golden experience if we are ahead. We want to protect our own camps. We want to protect the level 4 camps. Your bot side here means nothing. Echo's on so much gold, he can buy items, and 350, what did we talk about this as a timer? 345 until 4 minutes. We want to be doing what? We want to be basing for 420. That's right, the first level 4 camp that's going to respawn Krugs and Raptors. Echo recalling here, even though he should have recalled a little bit earlier, is more than fine and still really good because he would cover his top side from Diana. Unfortunately in this game, what ends up happening is that Echo stays on the map instead of just basing and covering his top side, and while all this happens, because the Echo actually ends up recalling here and running to his bot camps, and even running mid, you can see, even if he picks up a kill here, I'm not really that chuffed about it, because in terms of the 1v1, he's giving up a lot to the weaker Diana, who he killed at level 3. So in my head, I'm thinking, you killed the enemy jungler at level 3 with the same amount of gold spent, now you've spent more gold, but you want to forget about them. You keep snowballing the jungle. You keep thinking about them. Where are they going to be? What's their counterplay? What are they going to take from me? I'm protecting these camps. No, 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 no. I'm the one who's hitting your camps. Don't come near mine. Diana ends up hitting level 4 for 3, even though she dies at the end of this, which is another tip I'm just going to give you guys. We've already talked about it. That was just a misplay from Echo on 2 occasions. The next misplay is this one right here. When Devious sees that the enemy jungler is topside and he should know that her bot camps are up, he should immediately ping on the way to Raptors. In he goes and he takes these camps. Now, of course, if you think that Aurelia has warded the Pixel Brush, like if Echo runs through the Pixel Brush here and knows that they know he's going to invade the Raptors, it's risky, right? Because Aurelia is healthy enough to maybe contest him on the Raptors, and he's just wasting his time. It's actually just better there just to clear his blue buff and Gromp, because that's guaranteed golden experience. Running to Raptors on vision is not guaranteed. He might get hit by the enemy's support, mid laner, jungler in the next 10 to 20 seconds, right? But now I think he definitely can, and because it's most likely not warded, he can take these for free and maybe even Diana's Krugs. Also another tip here, guys. If you invade an enemy quadrant, so Raptors and Krugs, Wolves and Gromp, save your smite for as long as possible. Way too many people just invade and blow their smite on a camp they don't actually need it for. Save your smite for the second camp. That is more likely to be contested. Another thing here I just want to point out as well is that you should look at camps and think about windows of opportunity or timing windows. There is going to be a timer on these camps. Like, don't worry about if they're there or not. The most important thing about camps is, how long do I have until the enemy jungler is going to be here? How long do I have until I might get caught? That's what you're asking yourself. That will determine your camp priority. Because Echo here, like I said, Blue Gromp is an option after his Wolves. He could even, like, I don't know, go to his Raptors. He can go to Diana's Raptors and Krugs. Do you think Diana is going to check his bot side here? Like, go to Echo's Blue and Gromp? That's probably never going to happen. Like, Echo has an eternity to clear those camps when he wants to. But there is a timer on Diana's Raptors and Diana's Krugs. Let's say it's 40 seconds. You've got 40 seconds to do it, to take Raptors. You've got 50 seconds to take Krugs around that time. That's why you prioritize those camps more. Now, if we move to another game here, this is one of the more interesting games I've coached in recent times. And this is Marsho, who's around Plat 2 in NA. After this session, he won like 3-4 games in a row and sent me a message and stuff, saying like how the timings had really helped him. And he also had like kind of a theory, or not theory, I guess, but like a question in this game, which was, I don't really have much CS in this game. Like, is that fine? Remember, it's not about farming versus ganking. We are about what? Gold and experience. I don't know if ganking a lane is going to be the right play. Like, you might be versing, like 3 noob lanes who are just always pushed up on 100 HP and you kill them all the time. That's fine. You're getting golden experience. The same way farming camps because there's nothing to do is getting you golden experience. So in this situation here, Marsho ends up looking at bot and knows that they're going to push up after this wave because Varus, you can see him on vision. These two look really killable. The only thing here I'd say about in terms of mechanics ganking this lane is just holding onto your W, and this goes for every champion as well. Being patient is by far the best kind of like approach to ganking lanes. Blowing your abilities straight away is generally a bad thing, especially if the enemy champions have flashes and escapes and stuff like that. You want your key ability, so for Belveth it might be your W, to knock them up after they flash. So just be a little bit patient. After this play though, he gets 2 kills and looks mid lane. He sees that the Kindred is not going for this bot side mark, so the Belveth is going to get this. Now we know in this game, guys, that Kindred went from red, Krugs, Raptors. We also know that Kindred here has blue buff, again just validating that Kindred started a red buff. She's got blue buff right here, red buff has expired. So from this point onwards, we're trying to think, what is Kindred going to do, and do I have a hit somewhere on the mini-map? Well, her bot side is going to spawn in 20 seconds, yeah? Because it's 4 minutes. 4:20 is that timer. Belveth here, even though she has Noon Quiver, and it might even be a good idea, if this wasn't Kindred, to even base after these 2 kills, because she has Futures Market, you can see, to get a Noon Quiver straight away. But because she's versing Kindred, it's a little bit of technology here. Take this crab, and then insta-recall. Unfortunately, Marsho does something that lots of junglers and players will do, is that she ends up going mid lane because she knows that Cassio is low. Now, Cassio does not have flash in this situation, so it's actually kind of fine to gank her, but only if this was a 1v1. The trouble with doing this is that even if you kill this Cassiopeia, is that Kindred is probably going to kill you afterwards. You just blew all your cooldowns, and Janna being here is just like icing on the cake for the enemy team. So that might look worth, but honestly, it's really not. All Marsho should have done there was insta-recall after the bot crab, get a Noon Quiver, and cover his top side. Because in this game he started Raptors, not red buff, Raptors, the timing will be around 4 minutes. It's actually earlier. So ideally you want to base even around 3.5 minutes. If that was the case, he could have protected his Raptors if Kindred decided to go there. Now in this situation, where should he go? Out of base. Going to Krugs is fine, right? Because it's level 4 Krugs, and then he can go to his own Raptors. Where is Kindred going to be at this point? Probably her bot side. At around 4:20, guys, the enemy jungler, or definitely around 5 minutes, is going to be pathing to their first side of the map. So if they started on bot side, that's their first quadrant or first side, they're pathing back here because their camps have respawned. Same for Belveth. So in this situation, she should probably be pinging the Kindred is around bot side. Now after farming these Raptors, Marsho decides to look mid, which is great. And he knows that Cassiopeia is pushing up because if we just look at the champion icons on the map, like don't even look at your screens here, we can see that Cassiopeia is pushed up. We also have an Annie mid who has good CC. So if we time this properly, this should be a kill. And remember, Cassiopeia does not have flash. Even if Kindred is here, by the way, guys, another really important thing, even if Kindred is here, or even when you're ganking a lane, you have to think about the enemy jungler all the time, right? If I gank this lane, will this be a 2v2? If I gank this lane, will it be a 3v3? If I gank this lane, am I going to lose something more on the other side of the map? That's what you've got to ask yourself every time you gank. 2v1s, 3v2s are pretty easy, right? To predict, you're probably going to win. But is it going to be that much of a difference? Where is their jungler when you are ganking? You have to figure this out for yourself. So here, Marsho actually decides to move up as soon as this fight starts happening, which is correct, and he ends up getting a kill. You'll notice here as well, guys, like I don't really care too much about micro or mechanics. All I care about is your decision making. Faker, you can put him in a 1v3, he's probably going to die most of the time because that decision beforehand was bad. Marsho ends up helping Annie shove this wave because Annie is kind of, well, not really but she's killable for Kindred if the Belveth was to leave her here. So helping her push the wave in is absolutely fine. Now in this situation, I noticed, and I remember reviewing this, that there's a random control ward now on the Belveth's blue buff. I noticed before, because I was looking at the map as if I was playing, that there is no control ward, right, on the blue buff, and all of a sudden, after he finishes this, there's a control ward. Here's Kindred, and ends up fighting here. This fight, nothing really happens, which is kind of whatever, it's fine, but just being aware of that control ward is really important. Now, I'm going to show you one more situation here, guys, in terms of this course and the actual games we're looking at, because I feel as if we've covered a lot already, and I could always make another course in the future. Marsho ends up killing the Kindred here. I don't really mind too much about like this kill or whatever, I just want to teach you what you should do afterwards. So when he kills this Kindred here, we know that because my blue buff is here, we know that because my red buff is spawning soon, and it's close to 7 minutes, right? We think about what? What was the jungle timing around 7 minutes? Rift Herald. Belveth here is going to be close to a Kraken Slayer if she was to clear up. If she goes blue, wolves to her red buff, she'll be very close to a Kraken Slayer. She might even have it at that point. The issue there is that you are giving Kindred hits on the map. What do you think Bel'Veth should do here? Blue buff? And wolves? Just blue buff? What about just recalling? What do you guys think is good? And let's just say she could do blue buff. She can't here because she's too low. But if she could, what would you do? The correct play is to recall. You recall here because it's 7 minutes. We can get to our red buff. We can get to the top crab even. Kindred is dead for 14 seconds. Look on the right for me above the map. Also important, by the way, guys, the enemy champions' death timers will be above your champions' icons on the right. Kindred's dead for 14 seconds. I talked about this in the laning course. This is tempo. Tempo is pretty much this. Whoever gets to the middle of the map first. That's what tempo is. Kindred's death timer, if it was 8 seconds, if you recall right now, when her death time is 8 seconds, you are both running out of base at the same time. You're on the same tempo. If you recall earlier than that 8 seconds, so if it's 9 seconds, 10 seconds, etc., you are 1 second ahead of her. If you recall 9 seconds, 2 seconds ahead of her in terms of running back on the map, etc. Right? So if Bel'Veth recalled right here, she is at least 5 seconds ahead of Kindred, running towards the middle of the map. Is there something in the middle of the map? Scuttle Crab, right? The top crab, doing my red buff as well. So it could be like top crab into red buff. It could be top crab and just sit in the pixel brush and see if Kindred face checks this. These are called hits. And understanding champions' timing and tempo is essential, guys, to snowballing. I cannot accentuate how big this is. So in terms of this little course, guys, that was pretty much it. I just wanted to give you a little taster for how I like coach and what I actually coach people in terms of jungling. And hopefully you can see just how useful this might be for you guys in actually improving at this game. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. Watch this space. This has been Eagz. Bye.